let's focus on the Georgia Bulldogs. Let's do this one more time, Mason, and dig through this thing and tell the people why so many people feel like the Georgia Bulldogs should be number one going into the 2024 college football season. Um, Georgia's bid to win a third straight national championship last year was thwarted by the Alabama Crimson Tide, and for the very first time ever, the number one seed, number one ranked team headed into championship weekend, conference championship weekend, that is, slid all the way out of the top four. That's never happened before, and it was the perfect storm. There were teams that had went undefeated in Michigan and Washington, and then Alabama, ended up beating Georgia, and you couldn't say that Alabama didn't deserve to go after that. And Florida State will tell you, they deserve to go. So, it was kind of a heartbreaker, Mason. But this team had a little bit of an Achilles heel last year, and it was having the first or second round talent there on the defensive line, Mason. That was really what came down to, Georgia's season came down to their defensive line and not having that like go-to Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, style guy right there to clog up opposing offenses. And it kind of cost Georgia. And you could point to a couple other things here or there, but a lot of people feel like Georgia had the best roster in the country last year. And, that's certainly arguable. This year, coming into 2024, it's the first time since Matthew Stafford was on campus that you've got a possible, like a legitimately possible number one overall NFL pick coming back at quarterback. And Carson Beck is that guy. He's tied with Dylan Gabriel for the best odds in the country to win the Heisman Trophy at this point. And he had a really, really good year last year, which was his first year actually being a starter. So, that's where all the excitement comes from with Carson Beck, beyond the really good numbers that he had last year. But I think there's a lot of people that are excited about the fact that this is a guy that waited his turn. He sat back and learned this pro-style offense. These pro-style offenses got a playbook this thick, okay? And he sat back a couple of years, figured it out, played last year. If you want to call that taking your lumps, okay, then you call it that. But it was better than Joe Burrow's season the year before he had the Heisman, before he won the Heisman, if you want to look at it like that. So I think there's a huge ceiling. I'm not saying this guy's Joe Burrow because, let's be honest, nobody's really been a Joe Burrow hardly in college football. So I know that'll turn some heads when you say that name. But I think this guy's got the potential to be a really, really good pocket passer for the Georgia Bulldogs in 2024, and I think that he has got the inside track to make it to New York for the Heisman ceremony as well. Mason, what did you think about the offense last year? I didn't even talk about Mike Bobo, who I was actually kind of against coming back to Georgia. I'll have to admit, I thought there should have been a national search that went on. I don't want the Georgia Bulldogs coaching staff to turn into, just all the guys that came from Georgia and graduated from Georgia, and it's a Georgia Bulldogs club. I want the best coaches in the nation. But in this case, maybe the best possible option in the nation was a guy from your own backyard. What did you think about the offense last year and Carson Beck and all the trimmings that came along with what was a really, really good offensive season for the Georgia Bulldogs?
It was a really, really good offensive season for Georgia. I think it was the first year where the offense was probably, I think many would say, slightly ahead of the defense, and the way it turned out, both were really top five, which we've kind of come to expect over the past few years under Kirby Smart. But it was interesting to me to see the offense really catch up and surpass the defense for once. And I attribute a lot of that to Mike Bobo. I think that he's done a great job. He's to me in year one at Georgia, he was not as good as Todd Monken. I thought that Todd Monken was one of the best really to ever do it at Georgia or in college football in general. And in his 3 seasons at Georgia, I thought it was pretty miraculous. The first season was just okay in 2020. A lot going on in 2020, but the last two he put together were amazing. They were very fun to watch with Stetson Bennett at quarterback, who yeah, I mean, he's doing well for LA finally this year, but I don't think that anybody would say was an NFL quarterback, and nobody was saying that early in
No.
his career. So I think that in comparison to Todd Monken, Mike Bobo is good. But in offensive coordinator rankings for college football, I think he's one of the best in college football, and he proved that last year, scoring over 40 points per game. I think a lot of non-Georgia fans, even some Georgia fans, don't realize just how good Georgia was at scoring points. I mean, that's the name of the game, and they did it really successfully. They did it with a balanced attack, and also, you mentioned the defensive line in the SEC championship game last year being a little bit lackluster and not being able to stop Alabama's rushing attack. Well, Georgia also didn't run the ball very well, right? And all season long, it wasn't Georgia was not known as this outstanding rushing team, which is kind of what Georgia's been known for a long time, not just under Kirby Smart. Yet Mike Bobo was able to turn this offense into a point scoring weapon, even without a really strong rushing attack. We'll get to the offensive line and the running backs here in a minute, but I think that this year it's going to be a little bit different. I think that you're going to have a rushing attack that's going to really complement Carson Beck and his game, and these wide receivers that have turned a unit from a lackluster unit at wide receiver to a really good unit in the SEC. I think this is a deep unit and but one of the best in the SEC. And I'm excited for this season. I think that for as good as the offense was last year, I think it's easy to look at this on paper and say they should be better this year, even without Brock Bowers, even without Ladd McConkey. Those are huge losses, right? You can't really replace them. However, as a whole, as a offense as a whole, they return a lot, and 76% returning production. You can see on your screen there. That is a lot of returning production for a team that could have won a national championship last year. Of course, it's being picked to win a national championship this year. It's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I just want to make a point to some people because I've heard this several times over the last couple of weeks, and we're about to talk quarterbacks here in just a second. But you mentioned the guys that have left here for the NFL, obviously Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, among others. But those two guys specifically, I've been asked several times, what is Georgia's offense going to do after losing two guys like Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers? And I understand where the questions come from. I do. But you're not really paying attention to what's gone on at Georgia over the last few years if you're asking me those questions, because neither one of those guys ever had 1,000 yards in a season or anything like that. I mean, last year, these guys weren't available a lot of times last year. I mean, so this offense was depending on some of their, they had some of their best players on the sidelines last year for a lot of these games, Mason.
Yeah.
And, I can't remember the exact amount of yards that each of these guys had, but I mean, collectively, they probably had 1,200 yards together or something like that. I mean, yes, that's a chunk. Don't get me wrong. What Georgia's going to miss is the moments like in the Auburn game on the last drive when Georgia needed a touchdown and Brock Bowers was there to get it, or
Yeah.
whenever it's third down and Ladd McConkey's awareness is on 110 and he's not catching any ball short of the sticks, period, right? Those types of things are the things that Georgia has to replace this year. It's not the production. Georgia will have the production. Who's going to step up in the clutch moments? That's the biggest question for this year. And one of those guys that I think has got a really good shot to do it, obviously, is going to be Carson Beck. 3,941 yards last year. That's a stellar season. There was a time as a Georgia Bulldogs fan where I was just praying, Lord Jesus, sweet baby Jesus, little 8-pound, 6-ounce baby Jesus laying in a manger, please give me a quarterback that can throw for over 3,000 yards. Please. And now it's been a few years in a row that it's happened. And so I'll never take it for granted again, Mason, because, I mean, we went through the Jake Fromm era, and the list goes on and on and on, okay, honestly. But Georgia has really kind of stepped into more of a modern offense, it feels like, over the last few years, and just has way better playmakers than we ever did as well. So there's something to be said for that. But Carson Beck just like totally just like casually went out there last year and threw for 3,941 yards. Like, this guy, it's possible, could throw for 4,200 yards this year. I mean, that is, I, I, I mean, if that was an over under, I think I might take over. I mean, you always get the risk of injury, and I can't predict an injury, but I'm really high on this guy, Mason. I think he's going to throw for more than 30 touchdowns this season for sure. And I think collectively, because I don't see any way the Georgia Bulldogs miss out on the 12-team playoff, I think this guy's going to cruise well over 4,000 yards for the year. It's going to be hard to keep him out of New York and out of the Heisman ceremony, in my opinion, with the team that he's got around him. What do you think about Carson Beck and progression we've seen? We get year 2 of this guy in the system. The Gatorade Player of the Year out of Florida, guy who won a state championship in high school. People forget about this guy, Mason. He sat on the bench for a couple years, and everybody forgets who he is. But he has always been a big deal to Georgia fans, and I think all that work is coming to a point in 2024 for him. What do you think?
Mhm. Well, it's funny. I was listening to a podcast maybe yesterday or just the other day, and it was one of the On Three podcasts, and they had a Ole Miss beat writer on there. And they were talking about Jackson Dart, obviously, and we're talking about the program that Lane Kiffin has built, and the On Three reporter there kind of pushed back and was like, "Well, what happens when Jackson Dart leaves?" And he's like, "Well, nobody knew who Carson Beck was when Stetson Bennett left." And the On Three reporter was like, "I did." Like, what do you mean? This was a highly sought
Yeah,
after guy, and of course, like we know what he meant, right? Of course, a college football junkie would know who Carson Beck is, but um, generally, most people didn't. Like most casual college football fans had no idea who Carson Beck was.
right.
I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like this guy, I guess for a lot of people, did come out of nowhere, but going back to his high school days, yeah, he led his team as a true sophomore, I believe, just in his second year of playing football. This was a baseball recruit, was had a scholarship to play at Florida. To play baseball, and was gonna walk onto the football team. Well, anyways, he leads his team that won 3 games the year prior in the highest classification of high school football in the state of Florida to a perfect season, and had 350 passing yards in the first half of the state championship football game, and 5 touchdowns. And so that's the type of gamer that you're getting in Carson Beck. So when he did that, it put him on the map. And I may have that messed up. It might have been his junior season, but you get my point. He was a household name in high school football for the state of Florida. Now he's getting his shot on the biggest stage that he's been in college football. Probably should have went pro last year. I think in most cases in the pre NIL era, he's going to the pros and making some money. In the NIL era, he's able to make the whispers are $3 million this year to come back and play at the University of Georgia, and I think he has a Lambo to prove that. So it's a huge get for Georgia. He's the reason they're picked to win the national championship. If you take Carson Beck out of the picture, I'm not saying that they wouldn't, but Georgia would not be picked to win the national championship this year because there would be an unknown at the quarterback position. Whether it would probably be Gunnar Stockton, who I think is a fine backup, right now, or a Jaden Rashada who came in via the transfer portal. But Carson Beck is the reason that this offense is projected to be a top 5 offense once again this season. And that's how it should be. I mean, he's a heck of a playmaker. He is the offense this year, and this at least the nucleus of the offense. And I think he is playing himself to New York and playing himself into a first round draft pick. I don't want to pump him up anymore. I think that he's been better than advertised, and now, like you said, we're getting a second year of Carson Beck. He was almost a first round draft pick in one season of playing college football. We're going to get a second season, and I think he's going to light it up.
Well, we just doused him in sugar. We were so sweet to him.
I
Let's
didn't
let's
mean
talk
to.
about
I really didn't
let
mean to. It just happened.
Well, let's talk about one thing real quick, and it's fine. Leave it at wide receivers here because this will be real quick. I know I already know that you and I both agree on this, so um, I'll just throw it out there. He's got to get better on the deep ball, right? That's something we want to see more accuracy out of that deep ball. If you're going to be a Heisman Trophy winning, national championship ring wearing, Lamborghini driving quarterback, you need to be hitting 50% of them bad boys. You know what I'm saying? Make the 50-50 ball this year for Georgia needs to actually be 50-50. We need to hit 50% of them. Felt like we hit more like 40% of them last year,
Mhm.
and I would like to see that tick up just a hair, and that's being a little bit nitpicky. He had some drops last year too, so wasn't all him. Had a couple of guys who had the little yippy yips, like Mr. Arian Smith, who we're going to talk about now in the wide receiver room. He's not a starter, projected starter, but somebody that you and I have talked about a lot. Mason, I think he's a wild card for this team, and if you can get a guy like Arian Smith who has not only track speed but Olympic speed, then that's going to catapult this room. That's I feel like it's already really really good. These wide receivers come in all different shapes, sizes, speeds, route running abilities. I like the variety that's going on here. And speaking of wild cards, you got one of these wide receivers, Dylan Bell. This guy is my guy to watch nationwide this year. I think by the end of the year, everybody is going to know who Dylan Bell is if you don't already. If you're a Georgia fan, you do because you know how much of a freak this guy is. But um, you know, I'm not just saying this because he's wearing this number or whatever, because I'm pretty sure this guy was this same number. But doesn't he remind you a little bit of a Hines Ward, Mason?
Mhm.
It just seems like if Georgia got in a pinch and three quarterbacks went down, Dylan Bell would be the guy that
Yeah.
came in and played quarterback. And you know, eh, Dylan Bell. And if you don't know, guys, Hines Ward was a Georgia running back, the only guy at Georgia who ever rushed for 1,000 yards, received for 1,000 yards in a season, and threw for over 1,000 yards in a season. He, that'll never. I don't think that'll ever be done again.
Yeah.
I just not in this age of specialty football players that we've got now. But that's not even to mention Colby Young, who comes over from Miami, a big long target. Speaking of 50-50 balls, I'd like to see this guy be able to get some of those. And then you got Dominic Lovett, who looks to probably be the workhorse after the dismissal of Ra Thomas, who had some issues that we don't need to really talk about, but he is excused from the team. Innocent until proven guilty. All of this stuff is alleged, but while that situation's being handled, he will effectively be off the team indefinitely. Yeah, there's a few other guys that are going to come in and rotate. Mason, this team went and got London Humphreys over from Vanderbilt, and Anthony Evans is coming in. So, he'll Anthony Evans is a guy that I believe is also kind of a wild card. The more you can get out of this guy coming off the bench, I think the more productive of a year it's going to be for this offense. And that's not even to mention some of the freshmen there. So, what do you think about the wide receiver room? I think this is on par with what Georgia had last year, and I think uh, better in. I'm hoping better in some of those 50-50 situations that I talked about. I think this wide receiver room seems to be a little longer this year. Um, and I like that. There's a nice variety of guys, all like I said, all shapes and sizes. I think this team's going to be a little bit better at going up and getting the football in some of those 50-50 type passes and plays. What do you think about the wide receiver room?
Yeah, there's plenty to like here. A lot of depth. I don't know that you necessarily have a bona fide first rounder, in this group. I think that's fair to say. But a lot of depth and a lot of a variety of different wide receiving archetypes, type of players. So Dylan Bell is your physical. He's really a Debo Samuel type of wide receiver here. Can do it all. I mean, last year we saw him line up in the running back. I mentioned the running back position. I mentioned that it was depleted last year. We were missing a lot and just didn't have a ton of talent back there, to be honest. So well, they call number 86 out there to take a few handoffs and some end arounds, and he was fun to watch. He did a lot of good things, and there was a time. There were a few games there where I said, you know what? Dylan Bell's our best running back, and that's pretty impressive considering Georgia is widely considered RBU for some. Um, but last year I definitely agree that they weren't. But yeah, I really like Dylan Bell. I like what he did. And actually, you mentioned him playing quarterback. He did play some quarterback in high school, so we saw some of that on display last year with I think it was an 18-yard touchdown pass that he threw, and um, it's he's a really electric player. I'm excited for as a Georgia fan to see him get more involved because even though he was very involved in multifaceted last year, running the football and all that, I think that we saw him get underutilized in a way because he was back there running the football so much. He had to be taken off the field from the wide receiving position. Well, now Georgia, we'll get to the running backs here next, but Georgia's got the running backs to not really warrant having Dylan Bell come in and run the football. So I think you'll see him lined up out wide a little bit more, which is a good thing because you talk about 50-50 catches. This guy was making some impossible catches, like passes being thrown to him. And I turn away because I just know he's not going to catch it. And I look back and he's running down the field with the ball. And it's just like, dude, how the heck did you catch that thing? And he just did that time and time again. Very fun to watch. Really came on later in the year, especially with Brock Bowers being down. He's kind of a physical wide receiver, like a tight end at times. It's very fun to watch. But moving on, a different archetype at receiver is Colby Young, who's 6'4", 6'5", long, lanky guy. Really reminds me a lot of Lawrence Cager, who also came out of Miami as a transfer, was very effective for the Bulldogs that year. Honestly, was kind of a saving grace for Georgia that year in a lot of situations. Flashed in the spring game, Colby Young did, and if he's able to pick up the playbook really well this year, I think he's going to be a third down target, a jump ball target, red zone target. I mean, kind of all of the above. He's a guy that really can move and runs pretty good routes as well. I'm excited to see what he does in the red and black. And then Dominic Lovett, like you said, he's probably going to be the workhorse out of these three. I had 54 receptions last year, which was I believe leading the team if I'm not mistaken. I could see that number even going up this year with how much more he knows about the playbook, more of a grasp that he has after coming over from Missouri last season. It sounds like this guy's the real deal, and the fall camp whispers are saying you're going to see a lot of number six, running up and down the field this year. As far as the depth players go, you mentioned Arian Smith, 10-1, 100-meter track speed, ran track at Georgia as well as obviously playing football. Finally, I think last year was the first year he didn't run track and decided to focus a lot more on football. And we didn't really see. We thought that we would see him move from a wild card, which we're calling him again this year, to an every down player and somebody we can count on. Really didn't turn out to be the case. He dropped a few passes and really hasn't been someone who has had super clean routes. He kind of goes down easy when he does get hit. So I'm excited to see him hopefully put it all together and not just be a down the field threat, somebody you just say, run a go route and we'll put the ball in your hands, but someone who can do a little bit of everything. And my understanding is he was also a little bit banged up all last season. So this is supposedly the healthiest he's ever been, and he's going to get his opportunity this year, I think. Similar player to him, Anthony Evans, with a little bit more physicality. He's a 10-2, 10-3 track guy, so very fast again, but probably further along in his progression as a true sophomore than Arian Smith was as a second-year player. So really excited to see what he does, especially in the punt return and kick return game. London Humphreys, he's a 6'3 speedster, also a track runner. His mom and dad both ran track, and he's got the speed as well. I think we're probably not going to see him as much this year as he's still trying to grasp the playbook and things, but he'll be up in a couple of years, I think, for Georgia, and you'll see him flash some this year as well. And to give you guys a little bit of fall camp buzz, it sounds like Sokovie White, the true freshman coming in, is going to be really tough to keep off the field. You talk about a human joystick, a guy with all kinds of wiggle. Sokovie White is that guy. I'm going to kind of keep him on the back burner for now, but I think that he's a guy you can pay attention to later in these ball games after Georgia has kind of blown out whoever they're facing, and you'll see him get some reps, and he'll be fun to watch as well. But a deep room all together. I think the deepest that Georgia's ever had under Kirby Smart.
Yeah. Look, guys, this Georgia program hasn't had 1,000-yard receiver in a long, long time. Okay, there's a reason for that. This team doesn't rely on any one guy. Carson Beck loves to distribute the football. I think there's going to be, 5 or 6 guys with considerable amounts of catches. I don't see, I don't foresee a 1,000-yard receiver this year. I don't foresee it. I'm not going to bet on it until I see it because like I said, it's been years and years. But this Georgia football program, that's just not how they operate. It's a chicken or the egg situation here. They haven't had really any first round talent at wide receiver. So how do you recruit first round wide receivers or guys that have the potential to be, to come to your school, and it's kind of that old conundrum. So, I know it's not from, not trying to get some of those 5-star guys to come onto campus at wide receiver, but if there was one thing that you could pick on with Georgia recruiting, other than just a guy here or a guy there, that I can think of, it's getting the five-star receivers, those potentially first round talents on campus, and keeping them there. It's been kind of tough for Georgia in the style of offense that they like to play, but has not hampered Georgia from getting to where they want to go. Winning back-to-back national championships in 21 and 22. But this is a national championship team. We're going to critique them like that. And if there's not a first round receiver, that's something that deserves to be talked about. And but I think by committee is going to be just fine for the Georgia Bulldogs in 2024. Part of that committee, Mason, is going to be these tight ends right here. And Lawson Luckey, we didn't get to see a ton last year. Dealt with injury. I'm really excited about the prospect of that guy coming and seeing what he's made of. But the 2 guys that I've got my eyes on for the most part is Oscar Dale, pictured there on the left, and Ben Urosic. I nailed it that time, Mason. Apparently, that's how you say that. I was saying Eurosec, which sounded,
So was
hey,
everybody else.
I thought it sounded cool. So
Yeah.
I'll go with Urosic if that's what Mr. Ben would like. But I'll call him whatever he wants if I can see a little more of what I saw from him last year. I know the stats are not overwhelming, guys, but I'm telling you right now, Ben Urosic is. I'm not going to say he's comparable to Bright Bowers, but he's like a Bright Bowers Jr. I like their style. He's a little bigger, so it's kind of funny to call him Junior, I guess. But and we're not going to sit here and act like we've just got another Brock Bowers. Here we go. We got another Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is one of the best to ever do it in college football, and just an absolute freak. I think we're going to see that in the NFL over the next 2, 3, 4, 10 years, however long he can play if he's lucky enough to not get hurt. I think he'll be a Hall of Famer one day, man. But this group right here, there is some serious talent right here. We've watched Oscar Delp kind of develop over the last year or two. As I said, Urosic, I watched him live in a game last year. I can't remember who Stanford was playing, but Mason, I'm sure you remember. I came back to you and I was like, man, who is this guy? And then all of a sudden it was like he's coming to Georgia after the season. I could not believe it. What a small world there. But I love the upside of this tight end room. You got guys that can do it all. You've got kind of some specialists here. Whatever flavor you want. I always say tight end is kind of like cherry on top for the offense. If you always need blocking tight ends, but if you got guys that can go out and run routes and catch balls and have the hands of these guys right here, that's cherry on top of a really good offense that you've already got, in Athens now. So, just an embarrassment of riches here. What do you think about the tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Urosic, while we're on the topic, it was the Hawaii game, first game of the year that he went off last year. Had 9 receptions, 138 yards, and 1 touchdown, but averaged 15.3 yards per catch, and really kind of trickled off last year. The next game he had 54 yards, and then didn't record a catch, so kind of fizzled out a little bit. I think he did get hurt in
Yeah.
October. It looks like October was his last game, but yeah, somebody who showed some electric ability. We saw him hurdle a guy in that game, so it was pretty impressive. But what's interesting about his career at Stanford is, his first season playing, he was a redshirt freshman, had 653 yards coming out of the tight end position. Really impressive. Averaged over 15 and a half yards per reception there. And then it went down to 445 yards in his second season. Of course, with the injury last year, ended up with 239 yards in just 5 games, which is also pretty impressive for a tight end. I'm with you, Mark. I think this is a guy who has abilities, right? That most tight ends don't have, and I think he's going to be on full display this year for Georgia. Some have even said that he would surpass Oscar Delp as the starter, and that may happen. It hasn't happened so far in fall camp, and it seems like Oscar Delp is kind of going to be that guy. But if you're able to put both of these guys on the field at once, that's dangerous. I mean, you talk about when you had Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington on the field at the same time, that was also very dangerous for a lot of different reasons because Darnell Washington was a third offensive tackle out there that could also hurdle guys and had some great hands as well. But if you got both of these guys on the field at the same time, you're talking about two elite pass catchers. Would be really fun to watch, and they've also gotten pretty good at blocking as well. So that's in a 12 personnel set. If those two are your anchors there, I think you're in good shape. Lawson Lucky's next man up. He's also a guy who's known to be very physical, a hard-nosed football player. Battled injury last year. Was really projected last year to contribute as a true freshman until he got the injury there. But I think he's a big unknown, a big mystery in a lot of ways. But it sounds like he's going to be next man up and fully ready and capable of stepping into this tight end room and playing without very little drop off. And coming in behind him is the talented true freshman in this in this tight end room. It sounds like he's kind of maybe the most talented of the bunch, and that's Jaden Riddell, who came in as the number 100 player in the country last year, which is really high for a tight end. It wasn't the highest, but um, it sounds like Georgia got a really good player in Jaden Riddell. He's had a lot of buzz coming, being thrown his way. He was an early enrollee, so he was there for bowl practice. He's been with the program for almost a year now, so he's hardly a freshman. And so I think that he's another guy who can contribute, especially if one of these three were to go down. I'm really excited to see what Riddell puts out there. And well, I was thinking about this the other day, Mark. Jaden Riddell, based on all the buzz that we're hearing, he could be a Brock Bowers, right? Like that type of player that could, as a true freshman, come into most programs and start right away and be one of the biggest names in college football. But Brock Bowers did that without having an Oscar Delp in front of him, right? I think that's the difference. There weren't three players ahead of Brock Bowers when he came to Georgia that he had to beat out. That there wasn't really a pass catching weapon at the position like Georgia's stacked now. So a little bit unfortunate for Jaden Riddell, but a really good sign for the Georgia football tight end room, which once again this year is probably the best in the country.
If you're hearing about him this early, then that is a really, really good sign because, um, to get people talking as a freshman at that position, like you said, with all the embarrassment or riches there that you've got going on, and Oscar Delp, who we know the potential of, Ben Uraseg, all Pac-12 player, and then Lawson Lucky, man, that's really saying something. Um, let's jump over to the offensive line here. Look, Carson Beck's going to be protected very well. You return 4 offensive linemen here with starting experience. Left tackle Ernest Green. We were supposed to go to running backs, Mason.
Oh,
That's
you're
all
good.
right. We'll go back to running backs, guys. Don't worry, I haven't forgot about running backs. One of my favorite rooms on this offense. I'm rushing it, but let's talk about the guys that'll be in front of them first. How about that? As I said, 4 offensive linemen with starting experience coming back. Ernest Green. You're going to have left guard Dylan Fairchild. Sounds like Jared Wilson, Mason. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like he's making his way back to fall camp here. If he hasn't already, very soon will be. So that sounded really good. Tate Ratledge you'll have over there at right guard. And then really my only concern on this offensive line is at right tackle with Xavier Truss. And it's not from lack of size or being in the program. This guy has played some. He has been in the program for quite a while now. I can't remember exactly what year it was he came into the program, but I see that he's a senior there. So as I said, it's been a good while. I think he was at a Rhode Island. Just a massive human. We'll see. We'll see. I worry about him defending the speed rush just a bit. Just he's so stinking huge, man. But looks like he's getting the starting nod. You got guys like Michael Morris, and Monroe Freeling that are going to kind of be your guys off the bench. Man, I know you're going to talk about Tate Ratledge. I'll let you kind of spill your thoughts on him, but this might be the best offensive lineman in the country there at right guard. Just for your money, I think it might be. So at least you have somebody uber talented right there next to Xavier Truss that's going to be, helping out on that right side, and at least it's not on the blind side, right? We feel really good about Ernest Green and Dylan Fairchild over there on the left side. So, Mason, I think this is going to be a really, really good offensive line, and it's just in the nick of time for a really, really good running back room that we're going to talk about here in a second. What do you
Yeah,
think about the offensive line group?
yeah, I really like what I'm hearing out of fall camp this year. Look, it sounds like Jared Wilson is the guy at center. From everything I'm hearing, Cedric Van Pran moves out of the center position, and Georgia kind of was like ready for him to go in a sense. Like not saying that to discredit Van Pran at all. He was a hell of a center, and he's going to make a hell of an NFL center. But
Oh yeah.
Jared Wilson is a very talented young man who has waited his turn, and Georgia's going to be better for it this year. Sounds like he's the real deal. Dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury, they've throughout fall camp. I think just as a precaution, they kind of kept him out. Probably could practice, but want him to be fully healthy for the Clemson game in Week 1. So in lieu of his absence, Tate Ratledge has slid down to be kind of the backup center, and they brought in Micah Morris to play right guard and get some snaps in practice and all that. So really good to see because that means you've got a fourth interior offensive lineman who can come in and play. Drew Bobo is expected to play some, should he need to be, should his number be called. But yeah, looking at Jared Wilson, it sounds like he's the real deal at center. Dylan Fairchild's finally getting his shot. He's another guy who's been waiting in the wings, but is extremely talented. Nobody's doubting what this guy's going to be able to do this year. I feel like it's going to be a really special year for him, and you're really going to see one of the best interior offensive line, you know, interior offensive line groups in the country this year for Georgia. Those are three absolute studs. Two of them are unproven, but I think we're going to say really early on that this is the best interior offensive line in the country. Moving out to the tackles, Ernest Green is the proven tackle. Um, you know, looking at him last year, had 478 pass pro snaps, only gave up one sack and 8 quarterback hurries. Really impressive for a first year starter at left tackle. It was his second season with the Bulldogs. He was a redshirt freshman last year, but battled a back injury his freshman season that kind of kept him out. So really his first full year, playing and practicing with the team. Just really impressed what we saw, from him. And you touched on Xavier Truss, kind of a player that Georgia got as a kind of a low 4 star, a guy who was really raw when he came over, really big and physical, but they've turned into kind of a Swiss Army knife. We've seen him play. I think last year he was at right guard, if I'm not mistaken, maybe some left guard. He's played some left tackle, right guard. He's been all over the field. I would not be surprised if at some point in the season this gets jumbled up a little bit. Um, you know, and I'm excluding injury. Like that's probably going to happen too at some point. Offensive line is a very physical position, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Monroe Freeling kind of step up throughout the season and overtake Xavier Truss. Monroe Freeling is a second year guy. He's a true sophomore. Going into his true sophomore season, but is very talented, 5 star. Coming out of high school. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of take that starting position at right tackle. And then you'll see Xavier Truss be that utility piece that we kind of known him to be at Georgia. Before we move on, I did forget, I kind of overlooked Tate Ratledge because I just assume everybody knows he's the best offensive lineman on this roster. And I'm not just saying that because my eyes tell me there are some stats behind that. Last year he had 418 pass pro snaps, gave up no sacks and only 5 quarterback hurries. That's extremely elite, especially for an interior offensive lineman. Those are tackle like numbers, which at 6'6", 320, I don't think anybody's saying that Tate Ratledge can't play tackle. He's actually got
Yeah.
a tackle frame. But it's so physical. It's such a good run, such a good road grader and rushing offensive lineman. Somebody that you definitely want to run behind. So I think that's why Georgia utilizes him on the interior of this offensive line. But you said it. I mean, yeah, he might be the best offensive lineman in the country. For my money, he's definitely the best interior offensive lineman in the country, and really the cherry on top of a great unit for Georgia in this offensive line.
Yeah, from what I can gather, he's given up 1 sack in his career, and looks like he's ranked as one of the highest, run offensive linemen in the country as well. So it's not just the pass pro; it seems to be the total package. Let's talk about these running backs. Look, Georgia's kind of been known over the last decade or so as being RBU, or it's always strong. The Bulldogs ground game is always strong. You lose Kendall Milton, you lose Dejon Edwards, the top 2 ball carriers from 2023. They go off to the NFL, but then you go out and you pick up Trevor Etienne, who I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on. I feel like a ton of people are sleeping on Trevor Etienne, actually, because he was on that horrible program and team that is the Florida Gators right now. It's easy to overlook anybody on the Florida Gators when they can't even make a bowl game. Nobody's going to be watching their games, past the end of September if you're, winning 5 games a year. So nobody really watched Trevor Etienne like I feel like we did. I watch Florida all the time because, Georgia has to play them every year. So this guy's awesome, guys. And you all know his brother who went to Clemson and went off to the NFL. This guy is a lot like him, good hands out of the backfield. I've heard some people complain about his pass protection. I didn't really ever know that to be an issue with him. So, I mean, I don't know how much pass protection he was doing there at Florida, with that bad offensive line that they had. So, that being said, I don't see it as an issue. I've heard people talk about it. This guy is really electric. I think he's going to do really good things this year. Branson Robinson, Roderick Robinson, a couple of guys that you're, hoping to get something from. Branson Robinson, he had the knee injury, right? It was Branson that had the knee injury.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know when exactly he'll be back in full speed. Sounds like Roderick Robinson is really making a splash. You've got the always handy and dependable Cash Jones. He'll be kind of operating as a depth piece and come out and clean up duty. But a freshman that everybody keeps talking about is Nate Frazier, and saying that Nate Frazier is going to be really hard to keep off the field this year. Guys, this is a deep running back room. I feel like you've got 4 solid options, especially when Robinson makes his way back from his knee injury there, which he is steadily doing. I feel like this is going to be the best running back room that this team's had since 2017, in my opinion. What do you think about this running back room? I'm super excited about it. I just feel really, really good about this group.
Yeah, I mean, we just got done talking of the offensive line. There any off or This offensive line would make any running back look great. The fact that Georgia's got three definite great running backs, I think. Um, I, I think that behind this offensive line, these guys are going to put up some numbers. We finally get Trevor Etienne over, and I say finally, we're finally getting a running back that is extremely dynamic out of the backfield, somebody that we really haven't seen since DeAndre Swift. Um, which, by the way, the true freshman coming in, Nate Frazier, is drawing a lot of DeAndre Swift comparisons. And if that's the case, then Georgia is set because we saw DeAndre Swift make a huge impact as a true freshman as well. And it sounds like Nate Frazier's making similar strides in his rookie fall camp. So interesting to see, I'm interested to see what sort of impact he's going to be able to have on this running back room. Roderick Robinson, uh, look, the guy's a freaking bulldozer. He's 235 pounds on a light day, and he's very tough to bring down. He's a bruiser like Georgia has not had in quite some time. I don't remember a running back this big, actually. This is a Derrick Henry type running back. And as far as his size goes, I'm not saying he has cuts like Derrick Henry at that size, but he's got a little bit of wiggle. It sounds like he's leaned up just a little bit this year and kind of filled into his body some. Very anxious to see what he does. If there's a wild card in this running back room, it's Roderick Robinson because we saw the size, we saw how hard he was to bring down. Can he add a little bit more decisiveness in his cuts and get upfield a little bit faster and get to that second and third level of the defense a little bit faster? That's a big question mark for me, but definitely a very physical running back. And then Branson Robinson, you mentioned coming off the knee injuries. Um, he's he's special. We saw what he did against TCU in the national championship game a couple years ago, but I think he's kind of that all around back. Someone who you feel comfortable catching the ball out of the backfield on. He's very strong. This was a Mississippi state record holder in powerlifting as a high schooler. I saw him deadlift 670 pounds. This guy is an absolute stud and a strong, capable running back. Reminds me a lot, and he drew a lot of comparisons to Nick Chubb coming out of high school. Obviously, Nick Chubb was a pretty legendary running back just in general and still is in the NFL. But I think Branson Robinson coming back from injury as quickly as he did is a very good sign, and he's definitely going to be counted on. This year, I think that his number is going to get called quite a bit. Maybe not early in the season. He'll be on a pitch count a little bit early in the season, but later on, you'll start to see him get 10, maybe 12 carries a game, something like that. But this type of running back room, y'all, is what a championship team is going to need this year. We're seeing these players play more games than they ever have in a season, and I think that the depth at running back in the running back room specifically is going to be so important and so vital for these teams that are making playoff runs. This could be the difference between Georgia winning a national championship and losing the national championship, and other teams who we've already broken down that we've said that about that have two running backs, but there's a huge drop off between 2 and 3. Georgia, there's really not much of a drop off. I feel pretty confident in 1 through really 5 because you got Cash Jones, who's capable, and then also Nate Frazier, who is sounding like a phenom. Not to mention Dwight Phillips, who adds a pass catching weapon out of the backfield as well. I just feel really good about this group. I think it's as deep as it's ever been.
Let's talk defense, shall we? Um, Defense has been the calling card for the majority of Georgia's run under Kirby Smart. Glenn Schumann was the first person that Smart hired when he got the job in Athens, and now Schumann is entrenched as one of the most respected defensive coordinators in college football at this point. Georgia took a slight step back defensively in 2023. If you compare it to the ridiculous defensive standards that the team put forward in the back-to-back national championship runs there in 21 and 22. Most teams would kill for the stats that the Georgia Bulldogs had in 2023, but it was a little bit of a step back, and and specifically, the run game. Georgia allowed 113.6 rush yards per contest. Um, it was higher than the 78.9 and 77.1 they allowed in 21 and 22, respectively. Um, was it a bad defense? No. It was a bend don't break. Yeah, I would say so. Average giving up 15.6 points per game. That's not bad at all. That's still top 5 in the country. So this team, I don't think they lost their mojo or anything. It just was a different looking defense. I felt like the secondary was maybe a little better than we've seen in years past, and I just felt like the front seven maybe wasn't quite as good. You kind of had some guys coming into their own. We saw the growth of C.J. Allen throughout the year, which prompted the exit of Pop Johnson to go over and play linebacker at Kentucky. He wouldn't have wanted to leave if he wasn't going to have to share reps with a guy like C.J. C.J. What's his name?
Allen.
The C.J. Allen. I almost called him C.J. Harris. I got too many names in my head. This defense, I feel like, is going to be a little bit better in 2024 than it was in 2023. I feel like maybe the secondary takes a little bit of a step back, possibly. I don't know. Maybe it takes a step forward. I don't know. The linebacker room is the best in the country, in my opinion. The defensive line is a bunch of guys that we're going to talk about here in a minute. It's a lot of the same guys. Hopefully, they're going to get a little bit better. What did you think about 2023's defense? I still can't believe that Georgia has held on to Glenn Schumann as long as they have. I'm so surprised that he hasn't been snagged up by somebody like Dan Lanning was to Oregon, or Fran Brown over to Syracuse. They even took Fran Brown. I thought that maybe would have been Glenn Schumann's spot there. What did you think about the defense in 2023 and the defense going into 2024?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good unit last year. Obviously, fifth in scoring defense, 15.6 points per game allowed. That allows you to win a national championship, right? Those are national championship like numbers. When you couple that with the offense also being top 5, that's a recipe for a national championship. We always say that if you have a really elite like top 5 unit on one side of the football, you really only need a top 25 type of unit on the other side of the football. Georgia was top 5 in both of those. So you tell me whether or not they should have won the national championship. But shoulda, coulda, woulda. Looking at this team, we did see a regression in the rushing yards per game, rushing yards per carry allowed. Um, that was kind of the only drop off. I mean, the secondary held up. They kind of held their bargain. There are going to be some changes in the secondary, but I expect the consistency on the defensive line to show this year. I do expect them to play a little bit better against the rush. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were in 2021, where they were giving up less than 3 yards per carry. That was pretty insane. Excuse me, but I think that they will get better against the rush, take a little bit of a step back against the pass. Ultimately, I still think this is a top 5 defense.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's get into the slides here, and we'll talk defensive line and outside linebacker here. Um, Look, we talked about it. It's a lot of the same guys kind of coming back on the defensive line. At least your defensive tackle type guys. Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse, Ingram Dawkins. Hopefully he can stay healthy. It's a lot of those same names as us Georgia fans have kind of gotten to know over the last couple of years, and uh, you just hope that these guys take another step. And I have no reason to believe that they won't. I have no reason to believe that, but they're going to see some really good offensive lines this year. I'm interested to see that. I think it's the 4th game of the year. We're going to go over the schedule here at the end of the video, but you play Alabama and what I consider to be a really, really good offensive line in 2024. I'm interested to see how this defensive line holds up in situations like that. Can guys like Jordan Hall, Christian Miller, can they get in there and make some noise in the room? Can they be that wild card that you put them in there on 3rd and long, they get they get after the quarterback, or however you play this thing. If you're Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann, it'll be very interesting to see. We need, I feel like, an injection of some young guys with these older guys, and it might just be the perfect mix on that defensive line. Um, Outside linebacker Michael Williams. That's a name that everybody's become really familiar with. 18 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks last year, 2 passes deflected. Um, I like Michael Williams. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of Chaz Chambliss Mason, but it seems like he has gotten better over time. I worry about his speed out there sometimes. It seems like he's a little half a step slow every once in a while. But look, there are just tons. There are heaps of talent behind him in this room. Um, Damon Wilson, Samuel Mpemba, who probably a little raw, kind of a project coming in, but maybe you see him, kind of flash at moments this year and get an opportunity to do so. But tons of options because Georgia has just recruited better than anybody defensively in the country. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Uh, there's plenty of depth between the defensive line and outside linebacker this year. It's just figuring out what is the best combination of those guys. I think will be that'll be the secret for the year, and we'll see if Kirby can figure it out and Glenn Schumann can figure it out. What do you think about this D line and the OLBs here?
Yeah, a really deep unit. Outside of Michael Williams, I don't know that you have a first rounder in this group, at least this year. Looking at what he's been able to do, Michael's a guy who has all this talent in the world and hasn't put it up yet statistically. I think his move from defensive end to outside linebacker could prompt a lot of those, specifically sack numbers going up. But even his pass rush win rate was 11.5% last year. That's really good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, above 10% is really good, but that's not first round type numbers, and that's kind of where he's projected to go this year. It sounds like he's going to be moved to the outside, as an outside linebacker and be able to pin his ears back and go get the quarterback. I just hope that he doesn't lose his run containment abilities because that was really good last year as well. Ended up with 9 run stops, but this isn't a guy who's out there every single play. I mean, at Georgia, they rotate more than any other team in the country at defensive line, and so these guys are always fresh whenever they do get a chance to go out there. So excited to see what Michael Williams does. Is he going to live up to his potential and be one of the top 10 players in college football? That's kind of where he's at right now. So we'll see. Moving to the interior, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is a guy who's been really impressive when he's seen the field. You're not going to see many stats coming from him over the past few years because he's been injured a lot. But when he's been out there, he's really fun to watch. I would definitely keep your eyes on him. Moving forward, I think number 93 is going to be seen a lot if you're watching Georgia games. Moving inside more, Nazir Stackhouse kind of plays that traditional nose tackle role. He came in and filled in for Jordan Davis, which were very big shoes to fill, literally and physically. And he's done a pretty good job. He's been a pretty good defensive tackle for the most part, but we've seen him flash. We've seen him have some really good games. Probably hasn't been as consistent as we'd like to see, and maybe this year as a senior, we see a little bit more consistency from him. Same with Warren Brinson. I think he's another guy who you say, yeah, he's been serviceable, not elite at times, but at times we see him get in and look pretty twitchy. Can he get a little bit more consistent? If not, going behind these defensive tackles, you've got Xavier McLeod, who's going to be a redshirt freshman transfer from South Carolina, who really flashed in the spring game. He was a guy who came in against, granted the second team offensive line, but he was a guy who came in and was very disruptive. Had like 2 pass deflections in 2 drives. Had 2 pass deflections and a sack and a tackle for a loss. I mean, he was doing it all, and it kind of took over the game for a little bit there. So maybe he gets in and stirs the pot a little bit. Jamal Jarrett is a true sophomore this year. He's a really big guy at 350 plus pounds. Really plays a true nose tackle. Excited to see what he does when Nazir Stackhouse gets a break. He hasn't really matriculated yet as a player, but I'm hearing that he's looking pretty good this year. And then, kind of backing up Michael Williams at the outside linebacker spot. You mentioned Chaz Chambliss. Look, he's been pretty effective in the run game and as a run stopper, but lacks a little bit of agility and bend, I think, as a pass rusher. And so, behind him in certain situations, you might see a Damon Wilson come in. It sounds like he's ready to take the next step. And Samuel Mpemba is a extremely maybe the most raw, talented person in this entire group, but probably needs another year if I'm honest. He really didn't flash much as a true freshman last year. I haven't heard much buzz from him coming out of fall camp, but somebody who could definitely mature and get better as the season goes on. And before we move on, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jordan Hall. Jordan Hall is, I think he's going to be a true sophomore this year, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, true sophomore this year. Was a five-star guy last year coming in and is battling a little bit of injury right now in fall camp, but is someone that Georgia is certainly going to be leaning on this year. One of the many five stars, including Gabe Harris, who's another guy going to be playing defensive end. Christian Miller is another guy. I mean, the list goes on and on, y'all. When you talk about teams having three sets of defensive linemen that they can roll in and roll out, Georgia's got that, and there's really probably not going to be very much drop off whenever they do need to rotate.
Yeah, yeah. I feel I love the depth, and you're going to need tons of depth this year. I got a feeling we're going to get into the playoffs, and it's going to be, this team's missing this weapon, this weapon, this weapon, but this team's missing this weapon and this weapon and this weapon. So how does that? We're going to be doing a lot of that come December
Yeah.
and January, I do believe. Um, let's talk about the inside linebackers, Mason. One of my favorite players on the team, and one of the guys that I just can't wait to see what his career ends up being, is C.J. Allen. I live in Georgia. I'm a Georgia fan. C.J. Allen, I love seeing stories like this. The hometown guy. He's not from Athens necessarily, but Georgia is Georgia Bulldog country, right? There's only one Georgia when somebody says Georgia football, and C.J. Allen made his way over there, and that makes me proud. So I'm super happy to see C.J. Allen do well at times last year. Smell Munden was banged up pretty much off and on all year last year, and it was a bit of a learning experience for Georgia in that inside linebacker room last year. But you get Jamon Dumas Johnson. He ends up leaving. He's at Kentucky now. C.J. Allen filled in for him. Raylan Wilson, he kind of helped out too, where they were kind of forced to step up as true freshmen. Allen Wilson are tremendously talented, but weren't quite ready for that, late season spotlight. Look, playing football in Athens is a pressure cooker, y'all. I mean, the pressure's on, and these guys were young guys learning on the job. Really, really, really tough position to do that. And by the way, all the coaches knew that. Everybody watching them on film knew that. So you're going to get the whole kitchen sink thrown at you whenever you step into a situation like that, and maybe you're not completely ready mentally. But that was last year. This year, we should see a lot wiser tandem in Allen and Wilson, and Georgia hopes to, I think, keep Munden healthy. With all that being said, I think this is going to be the best inside linebacker room in the country, in my opinion, for my money.
Yeah.
I love this group right here. Need a little bit of luck from the injury bug, right? Keep the injury bug away. But everybody could say that. What do you think about this inside linebacker room? I'm really, really liking what I'm seeing.
Yeah, me too. C.J. Allen, might be the Butkus Award winner this year. I think that he's on a short list of best inside linebackers in the country. Only a true sophomore, right? He's ahead of where Roquan Wilson was for Georgia whenever he was here, or Roquan Smith, excuse me.
Roquan Smith. He's
Um,
on the wall behind me right here.
yeah, yeah. So he's ahead of where he was as a true sophomore. We really didn't see Roquan take off until his junior year. And I think that we'll see that kind of season, to some degree from CJ Allen because he's got all the tools. Um, Really excited to see what he does. Smile London might be a first round draft pick, coming out this year. He had 18 run stops last year, only a 6.9% missed tackle rate. That's pretty elite for an inside linebacker, and I think you're going to see his name quite a bit. And it can also cover and pass. I think that's what's unique about Smile London and somebody, well, he's going to be one of the best linebackers in the country, period. But then looking at Jalen Walker, and I think Jalen Walker might be probably the most underrated defensive weapon on this defense because this guy does it all. He came in as a 5-star inside linebacker, really good kid, really good story, God fearing kid, and really like to hear him speak whenever he gets the opportunity. But anyways, a leader on this defense for sure, and someone who's probably still going to play a little bit of both. He's going to play inside and outside. He'll get his opportunities at inside linebacker when Allen or Munden need a break. You'll see him come in, and then I think where you'll see him for the majority of the time is at outside linebacker. They'll let him come in there on third down and pin his ears back and go get the football because that's what he does best. This guy had 20 tackles last year, 5.5 tackles for a loss. He led the team with 5 sacks, had a 21.5% pass rush win rate. He's getting to the quarterback more than 1 out of every 5 times. That's it, really impressive. And that was also the best on the team, obviously. But you compare that to a Michael Williams, who I just told you was at just 11.5%, and you wonder why this guy's not rushing the passer more. So by all accounts, it sounds like both Michael Williams and Jalen Walker could be double-digit sack guys, and if that happens in the Georgia quarterback or in the Georgia defensive line group or on the defense in general, if you got 2 players with double-digit sacks, that's really saying something because Georgia hasn't been known as a high sack team.
Right. Right. Yeah, man. Man, what an embarrassment of riches it is. That's why I said earlier, this is the best overall linebacker room in the country. Inside linebacker certainly is number one. You include the outside linebackers in there, I still think they're number one. This group is crazy. You recruit this many 5 and 4 star guys. I mean, the odds are some of them got to work out and some of them got to pan out and be really, really good. Like you might have a dud here or there, but man, when you get that kind of talent in the room, it's going to work out. They're iron sharpens iron, and that's what they got going on at fall camp right now. And that's how these amazing teams keep getting better. They have harder days at practice than they do on game day 95% of the time. And that's what Georgia's got going on right now. Let's talk about this secondary. We kind of talked about it just for a second when we were glancing over the defense from last year and what's kind of returning. But Georgia replaces a ton in the secondary. I mean, they lost a lot to the NFL. Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith, they're all moving on to the next level. And so there will be some big shoes to fill at corner, safety, and star. But you've got some serious leadership in the back end of the defense in the All-American Malachi Starks. If you don't know who that is at this point, you just ain't really been paying attention because that guy right there is a freak, absolute freak, and will be the leader of this secondary along with Dalen Everett, who makes his way back as well. So you make a huge staff change as well with the whole Nick Saban and all the changing over of the guard that's went over with the Alabama Crimson Tide. You go and get Travarius Robinson to come over from Alabama and coach safeties and be the co-defensive coordinator. And man, that's not just like a big coaching deal. That's like a big recruiting deal as well. Because you've just got, you talk about embarrassment of riches. You got some awesome talent coming in, to your secondary in the high school ranks, coming in as freshmen. You got Ellis Robinson, 5-star defensive back, number 2 player in the country. KJ Bolden, 5-star safety, number 14 player in the country. And not to mention some of the other awesome players that you've got coming in some of those other groups that, probably going to get lost in the shuffle for a little bit. But some of these young guys are probably going to have a opportunity to at least get out there and get get some work in mop up duty and things like that. Um, I'm hoping to see some more consistency from Julian Humphrey this year. Hearing some really good things about Jonel Aguero, who looks to take over there at the star position. Probably going to see some of Kyron Jones as well. Um, Jake Pope is a guy that I watched some and really liked some of his film that I was seeing. He was an Alabama guy that transfers over with the whole regime change there with Saban leaving. So a guy that Georgia wanted originally, recruiting wise, and he slipped through the cracks and made his way to Alabama, and now kind of comes full circle, makes his way back to Athens. Um, is this secondary better, worse, or the same as last year, in your opinion? Um, I'm thinking that it has an opportunity to be better, but you're going to have to see some of these guys that we've got questions about step up and kind of grow into their roles. Probably going to be some questions at the beginning of the year. Probably going to look a whole lot different towards the end of the year. What are your thoughts about the secondary this year?
Well, it's really tough to say that it's going to be better. Your mainstay is Malachi Starks. I don't expect his level of play to drop off. You've also got Dalen Everett, who, as you mentioned, played last year. I don't expect his play to drop off. In fact, I think that he will get a little bit better this year. Not being the cornerback playing opposite of Kamari Lassiter will help. You will get a little bit less targets potentially. But when you look at what they lost in Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard, and Tyke Smith, all playing in the NFL. In fact, Kamari Lassiter and Javon Bullard sounds like are going to be starting as rookies in the NFL. It's tough to say that they're going to get better. I agree with you. There's a lot of potential in this room. Janelle Aguero is a guy playing the nickelback position that was a former 5-star at times or coming out of high school a couple years ago. And sorry, I just tripped Siri again. Um, Janelle Aguero was a 5-star coming out of high school at times, and is really ready to take his next step in college football, and is a big physical player playing out of the nickelback position. I've liked what I've seen when he's come in and mop up duty so far, but he's finally getting his slot or his shot after playing behind Tyke Smith, for the past couple of years. Really excited to see what he's able to do. And Julian Humphrey is a player who might have unseated Dalen Everett last season before he went down with an injury. It looked like Georgia had kind of thrown in Julian Humphrey to see how he was doing. I forget which game it was, but Dalen Everett was getting uh, was getting burned really a few times. They bring in Julian Humphrey, and he was pretty much locked down, and then eventually went down with an injury. So excited to see what he's able to do at the other quarterback position. I think that you've got a position at safety with Dan Jackson, who has been a serviceable player, but Dan Jackson, look, he's just a guy. It is what it is. He's a baller. I mean, he's a playmaker in a sense of, or not a playmaker, but he's a hard player, right? Um, but not the most talented guy. Someone who is talented coming in behind him is KJ Bolden, who comes in from Buford High School as a 5-star, and he seems to be as advertised. He's come into summer and fall workouts and all that, and he's going to be a tough guy to keep off the field. But regardless, you've got some pretty good depth there. And another true freshman coming in is Ellis Robinson, who was the number 2 player in the country. Some picked him to be actually above Jeremiah Smith as the number 1 player in the country. And he plays cornerback. I think he's going to be a really tough guy to keep off the field. Haven't heard a whole lot of his name coming out of fall camp, just given that you've got Dalen Everett, you've got Julian Humphrey in front of him, and you've also got Daniel Harris as a cornerback ahead of him on the depth chart. But I think that Ellis Robinson is going to work his way into a starting role by the end of the season. Maybe we see him in the playoffs or something like that. But I just don't see any way he's going to stay off the field, even at a place like Georgia.
Yeah, and we talked about a guy, Jake Pope, that I liked. Maybe we can see him kind of help out with Dan Jackson a little bit. I think Jake Pope may be a Jag plus, whereas Dan Jackson I feel like is kind of just he's a Jag, just a Jag, right? Um, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think there's going to be a lot of movement in this room. As I said, I think it's going to look different at the beginning of the year than it does at the end of the year. So something that we'll definitely keep an eye on. Not from lack of talent, plenty of talent there. But Dan Jackson is somebody that I'd like to kind of keep my eye on. And as Shane Gillis said, I think he's a smart player, smart guy.
Yeah.
Let's look at this schedule, Mason. Um, one of the not one of the it is the hardest schedule for Georgia that I've ever seen personally. um it's really really tough, really really tough. You start off the season with Clemson. Everybody's ready for that game. We're just a mere days away. And all you people watching, please comment. Let us know what you think Georgia's record's going to be in 2024. What do you think about these games? We'd love to talk with you guys. We're a couple of Georgia Bulldogs fans, so we'll talk with you till the cows come home about some Georgia football. So we got to end this video at some point, though. So let's jump through this thing. Clemson, you start off the season. I'm not a Cade Klubnik guy, Mason. There's been a lot of pieces that had to be replaced on the Clemson's defense. I think Georgia's going to be able to figure that one out. I think the spread's about 13 or 14 points as it sits right now. If it's 13, I would think that it would keep going up. But with that being said, I think Georgia can get that neutral site game figured out there in Atlanta. We're not going to worry about Tennessee Tech. At Kentucky, I think Kentucky is going to be better than what some people think. I saw somebody say 6 wins today in the comment section of our Kentucky breakdown. I think there's a fat chance in hell Kentucky ends with 6 wins. Something really bad went wrong, like quarterbacks got hurt or something really really bad would have to happen for that. So I think that is going to be a formidable game. I think it's luckily for the Georgia Bulldogs, there's a bye week between Kentucky and that following game, which is Alabama on September 28th. But to kind of put a pin in Kentucky, Georgia's going to be facing off against Brock Vandagriff, and that's going to be really really exciting to see. Kentucky's got a nice little starting group of wide receivers there that he's going to be able to throw to. So I'm interested to see what that looks like, what a Kentucky offense looks like with Butch Hamden there at the helm at offensive coordinator. At Alabama, September 28th. Look, I'll just be very frank and forward with my thoughts on this. Alabama is not going to have a very good secondary, especially early in the season. Maybe they figure things out as the season goes on a little bit, but this is going to be a very young, very inexperienced secondary, especially with the loss of Caleb Downs, which most would consider to be the best player in the country overall. I would think maybe you got a player or two ahead. I don't know, but for my money, definitely the best defensive player in the country. He's gone. I think this Alabama team is lacking a secondary, and I think they're lacking a good wide receiver room. I think it's less than a good wide receiver room, and I think it's less than a good secondary. So with that being said, I think to beat Georgia, you're going to have to be more than one-dimensional on offense. Alabama's going to be able to run the hell out of the football. That's great and all, but if you're a one-trick pony, then I think it's going to be really, really tough to beat Georgia. We haven't seen somebody run the ball to the effect, that they were able to win the game that way against Georgia in years. So I just don't suspect that to be the case this year either. So I think Georgia gets that win. Auburn at home, I'll give Georgia a win on that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Georgia's lost 3 times against Auburn at home in the last 25 years. So I'm going to keep going with that trend. Mississippi State's rebuilding. They're going to get clobbered. Texas, we talked about it. This game's going to be at Texas there in Austin. It's going to be a hell of an environment. Quinn Ewers and company going to take the field. I think Texas got some really good wide receivers, and so they'll have that dimension covered of the offense. But as we've covered on our Texas video, Texas ain't got no running backs. They're all hurt. So, and they're not just a little hurt; they're a lot of hurt. So, I'm really concerned about Texas and what they're going to do at the running back position at this point. Um, got some answers to or got some questions that need to be answered there. Not to mention the fact that they lose 2 first-round talents on the defensive line from last year. Texas didn't even have to worry about anybody running the football last year. I mean, seriously, they averaged giving up less than 75 yards a game on the ground. I will go ahead and predict that that will be double this year, close to double. I'll say 135 yards a game minimum is what they'll average giving up this season versus last season. So I think that's going to kind of change things for this defense that well pretty much could just guess pass every time last year and kind of sit back on opposing offenses. Not going to be the case as they make their way into the SEC. I think Georgia gets the win there. Um, you got Florida Gators at the neutral site. Florida sucks, and Georgia owns their ass. So I'll just leave it at that. Uh, you've got Ole Miss at Ole Miss. This is a game that I think Georgia has a chance to actually lose. Georgia's going to be favored in every game this year, guys. I mean, newsflash, fire hot, water wet. Georgia favored in every game they play. I mean, that's just kind of where we're at after the last few seasons we've seen. Georgia was riding a 29-game winning streak when they lost to Alabama last year. So um, I think you'll continue to see more of that. I'm interested to see about Ole Miss's depth. Can the offensive line do what they need to do? Against this Georgia defensive front, I think they'll be okay. What about the secondary for Ole Miss? What about the depth of that secondary, the depth of some of these defensive positions? Nobody's done better than Ole Miss in the transfer portal, but building a defense is more than just one layer of starters. And I think that Ole Miss is going to have to rely on some of those rotational pieces to beat Georgia, and I think it's going to be really tough. That game's close to a toss-up for me, but I think Georgia can figure out a way. I don't think that Ole Miss went in the transfer portal. You made this point when we originally recorded this video, and it for some reason didn't record. But I don't think Ole Miss has made up a 28-point gap, which was the difference between the game last year. I mean, it was a blowout. So I think Georgia wins that game by less, probably a touchdown or so. Um, Tennessee at Tennessee is, I think, Mason, I think you kind of talked me into it last time we recorded this one. I think that is the game that Georgia's got to have circled and be worried about. You can't have it circled. I guess that's the wrong way to look at it. But me as a fan, it's a game that I have circled. How about that? Going to be a really, really tough game there. And then you end the year with UMass and Georgia Tech, who do not deserve any more of my breath. Mason, what do you think about the 2024 schedule here?
Yeah, I think looking at it, I'm high on Georgia. I think that this is going to be an undefeated season for Georgia, and I think it will go down as to this point, the best undefeated season ever, the toughest schedule, and the best undefeated season ever for a college football team. Looking at Clemson, you mentioned it. Kate Klubnik's probably not that guy. I've got some serious question marks about Clemson, and honestly, after week one, we're not going to have any answers because Clemson's not measuring itself against Georgia, right? Clemson's measuring itself against the ACC and Florida State and Miami this year and NC State and Louisville. There are a lot of other teams that Clemson needs to worry about comparing itself to other than Georgia. We're way past the years where Clemson's competing for national championships year in and year out. That's just no longer the case. So, I think that that's going to be a little bit of a boat race for Georgia. Um, Tennessee Tech, yeah, you're winning that. At Kentucky could be a little bit tricky early in the season, but I just don't think that Kentucky will be ready for Georgia at that time. Breaking in their new quarterback, got some new weapons. I think their offensive line's probably a little bit better. Really like their defensive line, but not enough horses in the stable there to beat Georgia in just week three. I think Georgia gets the win pretty easily there. Get a bye week before Alabama. That's going to be super helpful. Georgia will have some plays on film. I hope that the Kentucky game is a little bit close. I hope that Georgia wins by like 10 points or something like that. because it'll add some motivation in practice for 2 weeks as you get ready for Alabama. You got to go to Alabama. It's going to be a tough place. It's going to be a tough environment, tough place to play. Still going to be pretty hot in late September. Um,
Yep.
and but I think at the end of the day, Georgia is going to be ready for that game, a little bit more prepared than Alabama, just given that they're breaking in a new roster, or excuse me, a new coaching staff, and a really good roster. But to me, I've got questions about Alabama in the skill positions, the back end of the defense. Um, Basically, a whole new cast, a lot of talent, a lot of young talent, though. And then you look at the perimeters for them. I don't know that they have the pass catchers. I do really like Jalen Milroe. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. He could be another Heisman hopeful this year. I really like their running game, but I don't think that in year one under Kalen DeBoer, the offense is going to be what the offense should be like in year two. I think Alabama in 2025 is going to be really dangerous in a championship contending team. I just feel like there's going to be a little bit of a transition this year, and it may keep them out of the playoffs. By the time it's all said and done. Auburn is another team that I think is a 2025 team, not a 2024 team. I think they're going to be really good in 2025. I'm hearing really good things about. They're calling them the four horsemen, the four wide receivers that they brought in that are true freshmen who they thought probably wouldn't be ready to play right away. Sounds like all four of them are ready to play right away. We've heard about Cam Coleman, but now as we've seen practice and Perry Thompson, who enrolled and got in over the summer, who didn't get to see in spring, he showed up and they said this guy looks like an NFL receiver. Like this guy is absolutely ready. And then there's a couple of other guys too that I'm hearing really good things about. So watch out for those pass catching weapons. I think Peyton Thorne looks a lot better this year because of them. But I don't think that Georgia will be really sweating Auburn coming into town. Um, I think that Georgia's got their number at home. Should be a 10-point win at least. Mississippi State at home. I don't think Georgia is going to sweat them. Then you got to go play at Texas. And look, at this point in the season, Texas might already have a loss. I'm anxious to see kind of what that looks like. Um, I really don't. I don't see Georgia having many issues with them. I think Georgia could run their way to a victory against Texas. Not that they're going to, but Texas won't be ready for this defense. Texas won't be as physical as Georgia up front on the lines of scrimmage. I think Georgia wins that one pretty easily. Florida's not going to be a game for this foreseeable future. Just put a W on your schedule each season for the foreseeable future against Florida. They're just trash. They're lousy, and they're one of the worst teams in the SEC right now, which is a shame. This used to be a rivalry, and it's just not anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
it's not that fun anymore. It's not even a rivalry SEC fans talk about anymore. So that's a shame, but Georgia will take that easy W. Um, Going on the road to play Ole Miss, I think that playing at Ole Miss makes this like possibly the toughest game that Georgia faces. Or that Georgia plays, the toughest team that Georgia faces because it's on the road in Oxford. Ole Miss might be undefeated at this point in the season. It's going to be a really crazy environment in Oxford, but like you said, I don't think that they've done enough to make up nearly a 30-point, point differential there. And so I do think that Georgia's going to win, although I do think it's within a touchdown type of game. I think it will be pretty close. Tennessee at home for Georgia. That's the game that I wonder, right? You get a week after a very emotional win for Georgia at Ole Miss. Um, to me, that's the one that Kirby's got to be pushing those guys onto the bus, telling them to get their butts home to get prepared for Tennessee because that game's going to come pretty quick, and you can't ride the emotional high of a what's probably going to be a top five win over Ole Miss into the next week because they'll get snake bit if they do. Tennessee's going to be really good, y'all. They've got a very deep roster. A little bit concerned about them in the secondary, but everywhere else they're pretty dang good. So Georgia better watch out. You don't want to drop a home game. You don't want to lose to Tennessee in general, but that's one that you could get bid on. You're winning against UMass. You're winning against Georgia Tech. I got Georgia going 12-0, like I said.
And I think I messed up whenever I was talking on my segment there. I think I said that Georgia was playing at Tennessee, so that is correct. Mason, you had it correct. It's at Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium in Athens, Georgia, which helps Georgia a ton. It really does because I've been there on the banks of the river at Neyland Stadium, and whenever Tennessee wasn't even that good, it was in that lull, where they like went through like 10 head coaches or whatever, and even then the crowd was into it and ready to throw me out of the stadium. So they were ready to throw me down there with the goalposts that weren't there yet. So with all that being said, I think Georgia. My prediction for the year, I feel like 11-1 is correct, Mason, but I can't figure out which one it was going to be. Um, this is a very, very tough schedule, but kind of like last year, we might end up looking at this schedule by the end of the season, and we might be saying, "Wow, Alabama went 9-3, Texas went 9-3, and Tennessee went 10-2, and Georgia went undefeated." I mean, I think that's super, super possible. So my official prediction is going to be 11-1. I think if Georgia loses a game, I think it'll be at Ole Miss. And then I think Georgia can get their revenge in the SEC championship if that is the case there. Georgia fans, hit the subscribe button. Please come hang out with us. We need you guys to represent our Georgia Bulldogs in the comment section and on our channel. We've got more Tennessee fans than we do Georgia Bulldogs fans, and we are Georgia Bulldogs fans. So help your brothers out. Come hang out with us. We're talking all of college football. We know you've got your Georgia football news covered. There's a million outlets. You've probably already got your favorite show or whatever to talk Georgia football. That's not all we're doing here, guys. We're your wall-to-wall Power 4 college football coverage. We're going to have a betting show every week. We have a ton of fun with that, by the way. We're going to have a lot of live shows that are a lot of fun, breaking down the upcoming games. The games we just saw, we're going to hopefully on there Saturday night or Sunday morning, live talking about what we just saw. Those are a ton of fun. You can come in here and brag or cry about your team. I don't care which one. We'd love to have some of you on the show at times live. That's a lot of fun. Thank you all again so much for watching the First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus, that's Mason, and we're signing out, and we will see you next time.